Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Everyone, please help me give a warm welcome to our next speaker, Dave.
I'm an alcoholic named Dave. Yeah, they call me Taper Dave. I like to think of myself as Dave the Tape Guy, although I don't make any tapes anymore. I'm sober 11 and a half years. My sobriety date's June 20th of 1994. I actually tried to get sober in 1986. I think it was May 2nd. I have a coffee cup with the exact date on it. I went to a rehab in Lodi, California. I'd heard about Alcoholics Anonymous prior to that. My grandfather was a drunk, and I don't know that he was ever referred to as alcoholic. But I remember my mom. I remember like it was yesterday. My mom said to me when I was maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, something like that. She said, "You know, David, you could become an alcoholic." And you know, telling a kid at that age that they could become alcoholic, you know, it was like telling them they could become an astronaut or a jet pilot or a brain surgeon or a scientist. You know, it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. But I had this in the back of my head. And I remember sometime back in the 60s, for those of you doing the math, I'm 51. I was born in 54. So back in the 60s, I was in my teens. We had this Uncle Dutch come out from Ohio. And I just remember Uncle Dutch being an old guy. I have no idea how old he was, but he was old. And he was going to AA and playing golf. I was going to AA meetings and playing golf, and that's all I remember. And so that's all I knew about Alcoholics Anonymous. 4 things happened when I was 15 and a half, somewhere in that age range. I lost my virginity. I started driving. I smoked pot, and I got drunk on beer. I remember the drinking like it was yesterday. I remember it was some kind of family party, and they were drinking Coors beer, and I got drunk, and everybody was laughing, looking at Dave, you know, being drunk, and I remember having to pee. I remember having to go to the bathroom and having to pee, and everybody thought that was funny. I remember in high school, this guy, Jerry O'Connell, I remember this like it was yesterday. Jerry asked me if I wanted to go to Chuck Kell's house. If I wanted to cut class, go to Chuck Kell's house and get stoned. I had no idea what he was talking about. But Jerry O'Connell was cool, and I wanted to be with Jerry O'Connell. I wanted to be in that, because I was kind of like a nerd. You know, I played the clarinet in the band, and I was an Eagle Scout. You know, I had that going on, and then I was this other kid on the other side. So I went to Chuck Kell's house, and I remember just sitting there and not getting high, you know, but smoking this joint. So it was an education for me right away. And then the next time we went over, all I remember is Jethro Tull was playing on the stereo, and I don't like Jethro Tull. Not a Jethro Tull fan, but it sounded pretty cool. It was in stereo, and there was a flute over here and guitars over here, and I remember that. And I remember getting sick. I remember this guy, Jeff Bickham, had a Corvair, and he drove me home, and I remember throwing up outside opening the car door and throwing up out on the street as if I'd been drinking. And I just remember wanting to do that all over again. My story just involves like little stories. You know, I don't talk about the steps too much. I just tell stories. I remember a friend of mine that I was in Boy Scouts with. I was a Boy Scout. We used to drive to Lomita, every Friday night, I think, from Orange County. I grew up in Santa Ana. And I remember Keith would stop and buy beer on the way home every time. And I remember asking Keith, are we going to stop and buy some beer? And we would stop and buy some beer. I remember one time he yelled at me, because I asked, are we going to stop and buy some beer? And he yelled at me. He says, is that all you think about? And it hurt my feelings because, yeah, that's what I was thinking about. Were we going to stop and buy some beer? And he eventually did, and I was fine. There was another instance. I had gone to San Diego State, and I was during a break, and I was at a friend's house and partying, had my bong, had some Miller Lite, and this roommate of his came home, and I guess this was a constant thing because he yelled at me also. Is that all you do? And that hurt my feelings because, yeah, that's all I wanted to do. And I would just blow that kind of stuff off because I would just continue to do what I wanted to do. And I kind of lived that way. I kind of snuck through college, came out with a degree. I was successful in that area. Studied television production and then got a job in television. My first television station I went to work for was in Eureka, California. For those of you not up on geography, Eureka is in Humboldt County, and I thought I'd died and gone to heaven, pot capital of the world as far as I was concerned. And a lot of my days were spent comparing Mendocino County bud against Humboldt County bud, and did a lot of pot smoking, but I always drank. I remember because I worked in television, I met one of my childhood heroes. I used to watch this show called Combat. And one of the stars of the show Combat, it was a black and white series, and I think it went to color after a while, but one of those stars, he had a public service, he had an advertising agency in the area, and he also did a public service show it's a small town, everybody knew everybody, but he did a public service show at that station, and his name was Dick Peabody. And I ran into Dick at the Ritz. The Ritz was a bar downtown Eureka, and Dick was drinking his lunch. And somebody said, "Oh, Dick's an alcoholic." And I thought, well, fine, He was a movie star as far as I was concerned, and I went in and drank my lunch with Dick. And I had no problem with that. It was no big deal to me. At this place I worked at, there was a bar right across the street, and everybody I worked with was just like me, and when we would get off work, we would go across the street and drink, and the old lady that owned the bar let us pour our own drinks, and it was just a party. It was just a party. My first TV station was a party, and I kind of lived my life through my career. I went from Eureka to Fresno, from Fresno to Stockton. I've been all over California, and I kind of just followed my career, but I always drank, and I started going to jail. I actually started going to jail in 1975, and it was always alcohol related. My first jail was Paso Robles City Jail, and then there was, I didn't keep track, but then there was the San Diego City Jail, there was the Fresno City Jail, there was Sacramento City Jail, Santa Barbara County Jail was probably my biggest jail. There was like a little substation in Santa Maria. I lived in Santa Maria, worked at a TV station in that town. Went to that little jail there. There was a jail in between Stockton and Sacramento. Went to that little jail there. And it was always alcohol. It was always drinking and driving. Always hid my drug use. I never got nailed for that. But it was always like drunk in public or in the 70s, it would be DUI, and they would reduce it to a wet reckless. It would be $250 in the night in jail. So it was pretty cheap. I mean, you could drink and drive, and you kept that clean for 3 years. It would go off your record and just be a reckless. And I would do that. I would keep it clean for 3 years and then get another one. And I tried to count one time. I think it was 7 or 8 times that I've been to jail for alcohol. And kind of move around with the different stories that I have. I've had crises in my life, and I've tried to get sober 2 times. Once was in '86, the last one was in '94. The first time in '86, I was engaged to be married to this lady. I was working at a Sacramento TV station. I thought my career had kind of peaked, and I dreamt of going to Hollywood, but I figured, what the hell, Sacramento's just as good. And Went through a dating service, probably went out with maybe 20 or 30 women. And it was always just coffee dates. And I would be drinking Irish coffee because I didn't want them to know I'd be drinking. And I'd usually get stoned before I went. And I met this one lady that, in your litany of things you run through that you want to do, that you talk about, hey, when you meet somebody, what do you like to do? I like to go camping, I like to go hiking, I like to go fishing. I like to go to movies, that kind of stuff. And then this lady I was out with ran through her litany of things she liked to do. Oh, I like to go camping, I like to go hiking, I like to make love, I like to watch movies, I like walks on the beach, I like sex, and I'm just sitting there listening, and these two things jump out at me because I'm a man, and I'm a sick man because I'm stoned and I'm drunk, and this woman says everything I want to hear. And eventually, we date, and before you know it, we're engaged to be married because I love this kind of activity. Anything makes me feel good, I'm addicted to. But I have no concept of love. I have no concept of how to have a healthy relationship, how to get along with somebody else. You can be yelling and screaming at me and throwing things at me, and I see this as love. This is my idea of a loving relationship. And that's exactly what this lady did. I was chased out of the house constantly, dodging coffee cups and ashtrays and glasses. They're breaking all around me, and I'm running out the door and, jumping in my car, driving around Stockton. This was in Stockton. And I would have what are called anxiety attacks. I didn't know that then. I just thought I was upset. But I would be, hyperventilating and almost vomiting just because I was so upset. And I had no idea what was wrong with me. Just thought I was crazy, thought I was going crazy. The blessing here is at this TV station I'm working at. I'm working the graveyard shift. I'm working swing shift. I'm running a lot of public service announcements for AA, and the Schick Center was big in that area. And they run through these questions, and the only two questions I remember kind of jumped out at me. Do you have problems driving? And do you have problems with relationships? And these were two areas that I was definitely having a problem with. And there was one night where I'm upset, I'm having an anxiety attack, but I don't know it is. I don't know it's an anxiety attack, but I'm parked under a street light. There's a light coming down, It's the God thing. And I just admitted to myself that I was alcoholic because I'd had those questions in my head and realized I was having a problem with this relationship. And it dawned on me I'd always gone to jail for drinking and driving. And, I thought of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I thought, that's going to take too long. I'd been running these commercials for the recovery center, so I went through the yellow pages, and I'm looking for places, and I'm calling them, they want you to come in, and I'm thinking, I don't know, Alcoholics Anonymous is going to take too long, so I found a place in Lodi. It was called New Beginnings. Checked myself in, what I thought would be just for a couple days. Ended up turning to be a 28-day program. This isn't the book, but I have a book at home. It's my $10,000 big book. I understand they're up to about $30,000 these days, just figuratively speaking. That's what the recovery center cost in those days. It was $10,000. And I had great insurance. It didn't come out of my pocket. So I'm in this recovery place. I'm walking around talking to guys, telling them about this relationship I had with this lady. She's throwing things at me. She's screaming and yelling at me. This is my loving relationship that I've got, and I'm engaged to be married to her. And they're telling me, Dave, run like the wind. This is not love. So I'm buying into this, okay, you're right. And broke off the engagement, and I just focused on AA. I'm going to AA meetings. I'm hearing things I want to hear. I'm laughing. I'm relating. I'm having a great time. But you know what? In the back of my head, I don't want to be an alcoholic. I don't want to go to meetings. There are guys talking about not having a bed to sleep in. There are guys talking about not having jobs, not having apartments. I'm running a TV station. I got a great apartment. I got a great car. I got it going on. I'm not as bad as these guys. But this is in my head. Well, I'm going to a meeting one day, and this little young lady's driving me to the meeting. I'm sitting in her car, and we pull up to this stoplight in Stockton. And lo and behold, in the next lane over is the lady I was engaged to. Pulls right up next to us. I look and I notice, and it's her, and she looks up and sees me, and I get a little wave. Okay, now in the meetings I'm hearing, turn your life and will over to God. Do God's will. Anything that happens is God's will. So this has happened. This has got to be God's will. You know what? If she calls me, that's got to be God's will. If we get back together, that's got to be God's will. And sure enough, a week later, she calls me. We go out. Bam, it's back on. God's will. You know, I'm living God's will. This is God's will for me to be back in this relationship with this crazy lady. Of course, I'm crazy too for accepting this, you know. And it was just back on, you know. I'm still dodging coffee cups. I'm dodging ashtrays. I'm dodging glasses. I'm getting screamed and yelled at. It's just total insanity. But I'm going to meetings, hanging on to my ass. You know, I hear what I want to hear. Work the first 3 steps. If your ass falls off, put it in the bag and bring it to the meeting. If you got a problem with God, don't worry about it. I had no relationship with God. Didn't want to hear about God. I didn't want to go past the 3rd step, and the 4th step involved writing. I wasn't going to be writing anything. That wasn't in my plan. So I took this lady to a couple of meetings. She told me, David, I was really impressed with the honesty I heard there. These people are great, but you know what? You're not an alcoholic. That's what I wanted to hear. You know, I want to live a normal life. I want to get off work at night. I want to come home. I want to eat dinner. I want to go to bed. I want to wake up and do it all over again. I don't want to go to meetings. Meetings are not in my plan. Alcoholics Anonymous is not in my big plan. When I was a kid in elementary school, that was not on the agenda for success. Alcoholics Anonymous wasn't a part of that. So I, in essence, turned my life and will over to her. Made her my higher power. I quit going to meetings. Didn't call my sponsor, who I rarely used anyways. I had several people told me that they were worried about my sobriety. We went to see a marriage therapist, and my sponsor told me that. You know what? And that wasn't what I wanted to hear, so I ignored it. And you know, I was married. We got married. You know, living the life. Insanity every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, every once a month. I'm getting screamed and yelled at. It's always my fault. You know, and you can only live in pain for so long. You know, I had no way to anesthetize myself, to relieve myself of that pain. There was an instance, the marriage lasted 3.5 years. There was an instance in the middle where I drank. Actually, I found a joint on the ground, and I worked in Sacramento, so there was like a 50-minute drive, and I found a joint, made it last 2 days. And after I got high, I just decided to start drinking, and that lasted about 2 weeks. Where I drank. And then I started going to meetings again, but I didn't tell anybody. Didn't raise my hand as a newcomer, didn't talk to anybody. I just started going to meetings again. And I think my wife even asked me, you know, are you drinking again? And I lied, you know, no, I wasn't. And I told myself if you know, our wedding anniversaries were nightmares. You know, I would buy the wrong gift. I would say the wrong thing. I would do the wrong thing. We would go to the wrong place, whatever. You know, it was just a nightmare. You know, it'd be a big fight. And I told myself if our 3rd year wedding anniversary was a nightmare, I'm drinking. That was my plan. You know, I had a great plan. And, you know, it was. You know, I bought the wrong gift. You know, I bought her a piece of jewelry she didn't like, or that she told me she didn't like, and I'd forgotten. You know, because I don't remember things. And walked right down to the end of the street, walked across the street and into the bar and started drinking again. And it was just on for me. I had a 50-minute drive from Sacramento to Stockton. I would buy a 4-pack of wine coolers. And my thinking was, this enabled me to be the asshole I needed to be when I got home. You know, because I had to deal with this crazy lady. I'll tell a story of how the marriage was. Just another quick story. We would buy these fixer-upper houses. You know, I've owned about 3 houses in my life, and I would always, you know, I learned how to do things from watching New Yankee Workshop and This Old House. You know, I got into raised panel cabinets. I'm a great woodworker. I kind of wish I'd gotten into cabinetry instead of television. Probably be more successful, have more money, but I don't. So I'm doing some work on the house, and my stepdaughter, I had two stepkids, and my daughter came home, and you know, I was making some noise, and she probably couldn't take a nap. I think was the problem. And my wife came home, and we're sitting down watching the news, and we hear this pounding coming out of our daughter's room. And we look at each other, and we're going, what the hell? Well, she comes out into the living room and announces that she's just kicked a hole in the wall. I said, oh, really? And here's a house that I'm trying to fix, and here's another thing I got to fix. I got to fix a hole in the wall. It's about this big, and it's in the wallpapered part of the wall underneath the chair rail. And I'm out of the picture as far as disciplining goes. So my wife starts screaming and yelling at her daughter. I walk across the hall into the bathroom, and I just sit there, and I'm thinking, this is crazy. Here I am fixing up this house, and here's, my stepdaughter destroying it. And I hear the little garage door open and close. Prior to buying this house, we went out and bought brand new furniture. We bought the kids brand new beds, brand new dressers, brand new, little things on the side of the beds, and there's mirrors, and there was this one upright mirror. They're built on a swivel, stands about yay high, and it's a $100 mirror, $99, whatever. Well, my wife went out into the garage, came back in, and I'm sitting there listening to her scream and yell, and all of a sudden I hear smash. She had gone out and grabbed a hammer, came back in and smashed that mirror, told her daughter that you've destroyed something of ours, now I've destroyed something of yours. So this is the kind of lady I'm married to. My first thought is, how can I get out of this marriage? My immediate thought after that is to start drinking. So that's what I do. I start drinking every day. And, the marriage just ends miserably. I violate a restraining order, I have to go to jail, get out of jail. I'm not a big God guy, but here I got God looking out for me. I get a job in Santa Maria at a TV station, 5.5 hours away. It's in a new field. I get into post-production, and it's a blessing for me. I move 5.5 hours down the road. I'm out of that insanity. Otherwise, I'd probably be in prison, because that's just where my mind goes. I do crazy things. I'll spare you those insane stories. My first thing, though, moving into town is to start going to the bars, because my favorite song from a television show is Go to a Place Where Everyone Knows My Name. It comes from the show Cheers, and that's how I'm living my life. I want to go to a place where everybody knows my name. I start drinking again, hanging out in the bars, meeting the strippers, the prostitutes. Those are the kind of people I like to hang out with. And before you know it, I'm collecting drunken publics and DUIs again. And my last DUI was in 1991. 4 months prior to that was in December of 90, I think. They put me on Antabuse. No, that was after the second one. They put me on Antabuse. So I had to take Antabuse 3 times a day, or 3 times a week. I would go to this place and chew this tablet in front of people. So I didn't drink. I haven't had a drink since June of 92, but I would do anything else that you had. If you had crack cocaine, I'd smoke that with you. If you had coke, I'd snort it with you. If you had a joint, I'd smoke it with you. I would get high every day because I wasn't drinking. In fact, my friend that bailed me out of jail told me, he says, Dave, you ought to just not drink. You ought to just smoke pot. And so I did that for another 2 years, had another emotional crisis over a woman, because this is my pattern. Can't have that relationship. This was a lady that was really smart, and she's a great friend of mine today. We've remained friends, and she tells me about my last day. She sat me down on the couch and told me, David, we can't have an intimate relationship because of what you're doing. Because I showed up at her house stoned every time. And I agreed with her. She never said what I was doing, but she said, because of what you're doing. So I'm driving from Pismo back to Santa Maria in my little Volkswagen van, looking over at my seat, and I had a bag of pot, a bong sitting there, and I'm thinking in my head, I got to start going to meetings. Because I used to do that when I was drinking. That was part of my insanity. After I tried to get sober in '86, I'd drive around shit-faced drunk in town, with a bottle of Captain Morgan and a bottle of Coca-Cola next to me, and I'd see a cop go the other way or come up behind me, and I'd say, I got to start going to meetings. Because I knew if I went to meetings, I wouldn't be going to jail. Because eventually I would go to jail. That's just where I go. And but I looked at that pot and that bong, and I went, nah. And figuratively, 4 months later, I got a slap in the face. She made a date on a night that I thought she should have made a date with me. It was the last night of a play, and a little bit of drama. And I'm driving from Pismo to Los Osos. There was a club out there called the Sweet Spring Saloon. And here I'm not a big God guy, but I'm having this conversation with God. And I'm crying. And I'm asking God, why can't I have a healthy relationship? And I'm crying. And get out there to the Sweet Spring Saloon, see some buddies of mine, start boo-hooing them, you know. Oh, she's crazy, Dave, forget about her. And the next morning I called her and we had a conversation and she said, David, I'm really not equipped to help you. You need some professional help. So I immediately start calling therapists. I went to work, that was a Sunday. Monday I go into work, I start calling therapists, you know, and they're not going to see you right away. They'll see you next Tuesday. They'll see you a week from Friday. They'll see you in 2 weeks. You know, and I got some pain right here. I got some emotional pain. I got a real hole right here in my soul. I need relief. You know, and these people won't see me right away. So I go home. You know, Tuesday I go back into work. I start making calls. You know, it's like around noon, 1 o'clock. Nobody wants to see me right away. And it dawns on me. All I need to do is go to a meeting. So I called up Narcotics Anonymous in that town. I was too ashamed to call Alcoholics Anonymous. Hadn't been drinking in a couple years. I'd just been doing dope. Figured I'd better go to NA, you know. Build up some sobriety before I go into AA, you know. I could come in strong, you know. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm pretty insane. And, you know, I walked into that meeting. There's a little Cook Street Club in Santa Maria, tiny little room. You could smoke in meetings then. And I felt like I'd come home. You know, there were guys telling my story, smoking ounces of pot, not getting high, you know, going to jail. There were some suicide guys there. I couldn't relate to those guys. I'm not a suicide guy. I'm more of a homicide guy. I'd prefer your death than mine. So I haven't had a drink or a drug since that day. You know, my sobriety date's June 20th. That might have been June 22nd. I had a couple days then. I got active right away. I started doing little panels that they had in that town. They'd go to these kids at risk places, and I would go there and tell my little story, my little tale of woe, you know. And when I was new, I remember sitting in the meetings, you know, and they'd ask, you know, it was one of these tag meetings where they'd call on each other, and I had so much to say, you know. I had 30 days, and nobody's calling on me. God, I was so resentful. I had some good recovery, man. I'd been around. I'd started in '86. I knew some shit. You guys wouldn't call on me, you know. That's how insane I was. God, I forgot my point. Oh, my sponsor. I got this guy that was I needed a sponsor. And there was this old guy that I worked with. He'd been at the TV station like 23 years. And I knew he was sober a long time because when I had to go to meetings, I saw Gary there and I thought, what an asshole. You know? No wonder he's an asshole. He's going to AA. And I used to think, you know, why would I want to go to Alcoholics Anonymous and become an asshole like Gary? You know? He was just difficult to work with. He was rude to everybody. And, you know, I went into work and asked Gary to be my sponsor. You know, I needed help, and I love that man today. Worked the steps with me right away. I had 30 days, and I'd planned a 3-week vacation. I had a little Volkswagen van. I was going to travel around California, take pictures of TV stations, go to a couple Skinnerd shows, and because that's what I do. I go to see Skinnerd. It's one of the things that's kept me sober. I had a little miracle happen. It was the day after my 40th birthday. I had 40 days sober, and I went to a Leonard Skinnerd concert, and I got backstage and met all my rock and roll heroes. I couldn't believe it. You know, and that's what it took for a guy like me. I saw Leonard Skinnerd when they came out in 1987, or when did they come out? That was the plane crash. 73. They came out in 73. I saw them at the Santa Monica Civic. They opened for Charlie Daniels. And I went to that show, and I was just blown away. That's the music I love. And here I got to meet all those guys, and I kind of bonded with the bass player. And the miracle for me in Alcoholics Anonymous is 6 years ago. Well, when I had 6 years, I have 11 now, so was that 5 years ago? Leon called me and asked me to be his sponsor. He was at a rehab out in Pasadena, and I got to sponsor this guy that was one of my rock and roll heroes. And all I did was show up at the concert sober. Got to meet him, hang out with him. He'd let me hang out with him up in his room, and I would just be there as a sober guy. And he'd look at me, he'd ask me how I'd do it, and I'd just say, man, I go to AA meetings, I read the big book. You know, I got a sponsor. And that's all I would do. I would give him one of those little medallions that we carry. You know, those little sober medallions, these things. Gave him one of those every year, and the guy called me. We were introduced to a guy named Bob T. when he spoke here. This was in 2000. And Bob invited me and Leon to a meeting, and I got to introduce him to a bunch of his peers. And, you know, Leon didn't live much longer than that because Leon went back out on the road with his band and he didn't stay sober. But, you know, the miracle for me is took my guitar and amp out to his room. I got to play with my hero, you know, because that's the kind of music I know. And, you know, made such a huge impact on my life. That's what's kept me sober. And, you know, I get to help guys like Leon today. You know, I record these meetings, I burn CDs, and, you know, I give them away, you know. And I've started a few libraries at places so that, you know, the message can be heard. You know, it doesn't do any good to keep these words in these rooms sometimes. You know, musicians go out on the road, actors go out on the road, whatever. You know, I try to help everybody I can. So that's my story in a nutshell. Thanks.
Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. And if that shows up, the gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.